Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Power Hour event of 2026. There's been so much going on this year, so already I almost feel like it should be saying 2027. But it's great to be back and have you all here today. For those that don't know me, I'm Matt Manners, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Inspiring Workplaces Group. I'm really pleased to be hosting this session on burnout, how leaders are redesigning work for sustainable performance, powered by our awesome partners at Breathe HR. Burnout is something, just from a looking on LinkedIn perspective, it's mentioned so often in my feed on a daily basis now, but it's something we've all been talking about for a while. But the reality is it hasn't gone away and it's evolving. More and more, we're seeing that burnout isn't simply about workload or individual resilience. It's about something deeper, how work is designed, how it's led, and how it's experienced day to day. Today is really about exploring that shift and looking at how organizations are rethinking energy, motivation, and performance to create healthier, more sustainable ways of working. Over the next hour, we'll touch on a few key themes: why burnout is a work design issue, not just a resilience one; the hidden emotional load within HR roles; why quick reset solutions often don't address the root cause; how people practices can either enable or quietly drain performance; and some practical ways to simplify complexity and lead with more clarity. All a lot for 1 hour. But before we start, a quick reflection from me and how I feel around this issue and just in general. The pace of change right now is huge, and it's not just operational, it's emotional as well. As a business owner and a leader of people, I feel that personally. It's harder to plan, harder to switch off, and that has a real impact on my energy and well-being. So I just wanted to, give that my own reflection, because we talk about people first, and it's sometimes we talk around these topics and do forget about people at the heart of it. So, but back to our talk. As always, it's not about me, thank God. We've got three brilliant storytellers who will each bring a different perspective to this conversation. So to get us started, and also I just want to say three storytellers that I'm super keen to have worked with for a long time. So personal highlight for me this event. So to get us started, I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Jo Burrell, co-founder and clinical psychologist at Ultimate Resilience. Jo's going to kick us off by looking at burnout within HR itself, drawing on data from nearly 1,500 HR professionals. She'll explore why burnout is often built into the role, shaped by emotional load and competing demands, and why supporting HR well-being is essential for organizational performance. So please welcome to the Power Hour, Jo.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. So as you said, Matt, I'm Jo Burrell. I'm a clinical psychologist. I spent over 20 years working in the NHS as a clinician and leader before setting up my company alongside my business partner, Ultimate Resilience. And we set up our company about 12 years ago. And around 4 years ago, we launched the HR Mental Wellbeing Survey. And we believe it was the first of its kind. And launching that survey unexpectedly took us along a path that we really hadn't planned to go down. But it does lead right to me talking about HR wellbeing today. So we have run our survey now on 3 occasions, so over 3 consecutive years. And I'm going to be talking a little bit today about the data that we gathered in 2025. We have already run our 2026 survey, but we haven't analysed the data yet. So that's coming, and there'll be a QR code on my last slide where you can sign up to get access to the 2026 report. So what did our survey say? As Matt said, we had just under 1,500 respondents to our survey in 2025. And the survey included a number of clinical questionnaires about different aspects of mental health. So depression, anxiety, burnout, well-being, and so on. These are measures and questionnaires that I would have used when I worked in mental health services in the NHS. So these are standardized measures. We know they're statistically and clinically robust. So what did we find? Well, the findings were really quite sobering. First, bit of data you can see on the slide. So 44% of our respondents, almost half, met the threshold for clinically significant symptoms of depression. Now, if we compare that with the rates across the general population, that figure of 44% is about 2.5 times higher than rates of depression in the general population. In terms of anxiety, we found that 38% of our respondents met the threshold for clinically significant symptoms of depression, which is 1.5 times higher than the general population. In terms of burnout, we found that 63% of our respondents were very likely to be suffering from burnout, and a further 15% were at risk of burnout. So we've got 78% of our respondents experiencing concerning symptoms of burnout. And then in terms of well-being, we found that 67% of our respondents were in the low well-being range, and 26% said that they had not felt fresh or rested at all in the past 2 weeks. So this begins to paint a picture of a profession who are struggling really quite significantly. And this data is specifically from the burnout measure that we used within our survey, and it shows us, some of the kind of the detail of what people are experiencing. So 56% feeling mentally exhausted, 37% of our survey respondents feeling that they have poor concentration at work, 30% saying they have no enthusiasm for work. So we can see that burnout and other mental health difficulties and issues are impacting people's functioning at work really quite significantly. And I think it's important that one of the important points I think to make is that burnout doesn't exist on its own. In fact, there's a piece of research that's out recently which demonstrates that around 50% of people who meet the threshold for burnout are also clinically depressed. So when you have a workforce or a person who is experiencing burnout symptoms, it's very likely that they are also experiencing other mental health challenges like depression, anxiety, and poor well-being. The other thing I think that's really important to say is that this is about HR. So this is a sample of HR professionals, and there's a bit of an irony here, isn't there? Which is that HR professionals have well-being within their remit. So they look after other people's well-being within the organisation. They are the ones who set out the initiatives, who create the well-being strategies, and yet they are probably struggling more with their mental well-being than everyone else in the organisation. So this is a big concern. And there's a huge impact. Of course there is. So these are some quotes from the research that we did last year. So we asked people about their sources of stress, and these were some of the things that they said. So what we can see is that there's a huge impact of this very serious mental health picture across the HR profession. And we've got no recovery time, I'm falling apart, nothing left for myself. So this is a group of people who are struggling and feel that there's no space for them to focus on their well-being. There's also another impact, which is 42% of our respondents said that they were thinking about leaving the profession. And around quarter said that they had taken time off sick in the past year as a result of stress or mental health related issues. So what can we do about it? Well, I want to share another set of data, final set of data with you, which really gives us some clues about how we might support HR professionals going forward and how we might change that really sobering and concerning picture about their mental health. So we asked our respondents, do you feel well supported at work in relation to your mental well-being? And only 13% said that they felt well supported. So that leaves 87% saying that they feel support is lacking to some degree. And actually around half of our respondents were saying that it was lacking very significantly. So either they had no support at all or support was very rare. Because we had a good response rate for this survey, we were able to look at that group of people who felt well supported. How were they doing? And what we found, I think, was really important and really interesting. So this group of people who felt well supported at work, they were much less likely to be suffering from depression, from anxiety, from poor well-being. They were much less likely to be at risk of burnout or be experiencing symptoms of burnout. They were far less likely to have taken time off sick in the past year as a result of stress-related issues, and they were far less likely to be thinking about leaving the profession. And this is so important, isn't it? Because it says something about individuals themselves. It's great news for individuals themselves. So those HR professionals who feel well supported, they're feeling well. And that means they're doing well at work. It's great news for their families too, because they're doing well in their personal lives as well. It's great news for the people that they're serving within their organizations and the stakeholders of their organizations that they're dealing with, because if they are mentally well, they're probably performing well, they're probably engaged. We know there's a really clear link between good well-being and engagement at work. So they are serving their people well, they're performing well at work. But of course, here in this data, there are cost savings too, aren't there? So the organization as a whole is saving money in terms of attendance at work, so lower rates of sickness absence, and in terms of retention. So if you are looking after, if you are supporting your HR professionals well, this is the impact. Our data demonstrates it. So what are we talking about in terms of support? Well, I think the question about what do HR professionals need is quite a complex one. And I think that there's lots of things to say about it, but I wanted to focus down specifically here on support itself. What might it look like if you were to provide a support system within your workplace for your HR professionals? So what's effective? So I think the first thing to say is there's really established research evidence that tells us that social support is really effective for our well-being. So if you have a good, strong social network, you are much less likely to suffer from chronic stress, and you are much less likely to be suffering from other mental health struggles. So social support is incredibly important. And whether you are an HRD thinking about protecting your team, or whether you're a lone HR professional, this is where to start. And even if you have no money and no resources, there are things that you can do to allow you or your team to access support. So we've got informal support systems on the left-hand side of the screen, peer networks, buddying, regular check-ins around the impact of work, around well-being. These create opportunities for us to talk, to share experiences, to acknowledge, to build a language, to create a language around the impact of work, because I think that is sadly missing within HR. I see it a lot with the people that I work with and the people who reach out to me about the struggles that they're facing. So these informal systems of support are brilliant for protecting you and your well-being. And if you have no money and no resources, you can still implement these systems. But what I would say is they're not always effective, because as soon as we get busy, these are the sorts of things that drop off the agenda. So there are some problems with informal support. That's one of them. We stop doing them when we get really busy, and that's exactly when we need them. And secondly, they don't have a clear framework which helps us to be clear about what the focus of our meetings are and what the aim and the outcome is. So that's why I always advocate formal support systems, things like supervision and coaching and so on. So these are systems of support. They're regular. We embed them within organizations. They happen on a regular basis. We have defined time for them, and they rely on frameworks and methods and approaches and tools that are established. They help us to be clear about what we're focusing on, and they help us to move in the direction that we want to move. Informal systems of support, often what ends up happening is we get together and we talk about Love Island rather than how we're doing in our job, or we have a good moan. Formal systems of support help us to stay on track. Now, how do I know this? How do I know that these formal systems of support work? Well, I have received clinical supervision all the way through my career as a clinical psychologist. I was trained in the methods and approaches of clinical supervision, and I delivered and received that all the way through my career and still do. And there is established research out there that tells us that supervision, professional supervision, is effective in helping you perform well at work and protecting you against burnout, which is, of course, our topic today. So when we saw our data, when we uncovered this really concerning data about HR professionals, we decided that actually supervision, which is a really established approach to personal and professional development, was what we wanted to deliver to HR professionals. And that's what we do now. So we're working with a whole range of different organizations delivering one-to-one supervision and team supervision, supporting people to process the impact of the work, to address and problem solve around challenges at work, to have space to reflect, to deal with the emotional impact of their work. And we already know from the established data around professional supervision that this improves our professional judgment and our psychological skills, and it prevents burnout, builds our resilience and our confidence. So we already know this is an effective approach to personal and professional development. So that leads me to my last slide. I just want to say thank you so much for joining today. If you would like to get a copy of our 2026 HR Mental Wellbeing Report, which will be out in the next couple of weeks, there's a QR code here. You can click on that and you can sign up for that report. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jo. I think we'd love to share that QR code as well, because beyond today, for people that want to get that, because I'm sure it's incredibly insightful. So many things I want to ask you, but I'm going to hold them to the end because they've sparked off so many different questions in me. But thanks for now, and we'll come back around and have a group conversation at the end. So thank you, Jo. Thank you. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Bharat Siani, VP of People and Culture at Breathe HR. He's going to challenge the idea that burnout is just about resilience. Instead, he's going to explore as a work design issue, looking at how goals, structures, and people practices can either support or drain performance, and how HR often ends up carrying the emotional load for systems that aren't working. So please welcome to the Power Hour, Bharat. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll leave you to it and see you soon.
Brilliant. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this Power Hour. Thank you to Inspiring Workplace for inviting me. Start with a quick question. So just in the comments, please let me know if you've been asked to be more resilient ever in your career in the last 12 months more so, or asked to build resilient teams. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the surrounding environments were where they asked you to be more resilient, whether that was from a manager, from a colleague, or from your workforce. And so most of the time, what we call resilience are issues in the workplace design, essentially. And so I'm going to keep referring to my notes. I've got Post-its. Unfortunately, I don't have a slide, so you're going to have to hear me speak. And thank you for Jo for setting the standard. But it's really around unclear priorities, constant reprioritization, emotional labor no one has named, but systems that quietly exhaust people. And HR often sits at the fault lines of this, carrying the emotional load for everyone else while being told to find a solution. I want to offer a different lens on burnout. So talk about the hidden emotional load in our roles, share some very practical ways we can redesign work, simplify complexity. Burnout is mostly about the system, not the individual. And so in contrast, there's two narratives, right? If only people did more mindfulness, time management, cold plunging, whatever the new trend is, or only if we stopped asking people to do impossible things in impossible conditions. And how we set goals, structure roles, make decisions, flow work through the organization. And examples of design-driven burnout, right? So constantly shifting, being agile, being asked to change, pivoting, and leadership giving you decisions that you have very little context on, having roles that combine high responsibility with low authority, performance expectations that don't really reflect resource or headcount reality, and in my most resilient person did the job, would they still struggle in the system? The answer is probably yes. Now, HR is often the place where grief, anger, fear, conflict land first, and some of those examples can be seen in different ways. So I've had it when I've had to support a manager through a performance decision that impacts someone's mortgage, potentially. holding a space for people in distress while also representing the organization's legal and commercial stance, being the one who remembers the history behind that simple change. And why does all of this matter? When this load is invisible, it's easy for leaders to assume HR is fine or used to it. And over time, this creates this mismatch between the emotional intensity of work and the support and recovery time and boundaries around it. And if HR were any other high exposure role, say emergency services, for example, we would definitely redesign this. And so most organizations aren't actually cynical, right? They genuinely want to help you. And I think most people leaders also want to make sure that people feel better. And so how do we solve for this? And so the problem really stems around standalone reset offers, right? So well-being days, away days, apps, those are fantastic. I'm not saying they're not, but they sit on top of some broken work design. And so people come back from a reset to the same volume, the same ambiguity, the same politics. And does this change the system people work in? Or does it just change how we cope with it, essentially? Our own people practices can quietly fuel burnout, or we can actually prevent it. And so some examples of draining practices, and you might reflect in your own work environment, both past or present. So performance processes that reward output over sustainable behaviors, policies that look supportive on paper but impossible to use in practice, talent and reward decisions that are opaque, drive cynicism, emotional fatigue. But let's flip the script. Examples of how we can enable some of this stuff. Performance frameworks that bake capacity and health checks, just not targets, essentially. Clear, humane policies around leave, flexible working, adjustments that managers actually understand and can actually implement them. Grievance and investigation and restructuring processes that are fair, timely, but also create psychological safety for everybody involved. One practical question for HR leaders is, where does our current people framework force actually help HR carry a disproportionate emotional and administrative load? And what can we do to strip or standardize this, essentially? Now, I don't think HR can fix everything, but we can simplify it. We can clarify more than we think. And one of the things that we're doing at the moment in Breathe and in Elmo, which is the parent company of Breathe, is looking at workforce design. So we've started with capabilities, not job titles. So we've introduced a question: what capabilities does this team need to deliver our strategy sustainably, rather than how many heads do we have? We've mapped out these capabilities against the current team. Where are we strong? Where are we thin? And we're asking one or two people to be superheroes, or can this burden be leveled across the business and across that team? We use that map to highlight gaps and then design solutions to go beyond the let's just hire another person. For example, we'll redesign the role so responsibility, authority, and support are aligned. Build targeted development to grow specific capabilities. And so where there's a gap, and we've highlighted that, make sure that there's some training that somebody can actually rise up to the gap and fill that. Build targeted development for growth specific capabilities. Shift or stop low value work that's draining capacity. And where needed, recruit clearly and make sure that we've defined those capability gaps and we're hiring for that. And we need to make the link that when we design around capabilities, we reduce hidden load, clarify expectations, and reduce burnout risk. Now, people aren't resilient enough for this role is not a situation, it's a process. And so build this into the leadership conversations, into the business cases. We've also started creating sanity summaries, and that's something I'm going to introduce shortly. So for example, a single page that will explain how performance, pay, progression really work in plain language, not pages and pages of policy, but one simple to understand document. Use this with managers, remove the noise, reduce the back and forth, ensure that they're briefed and understand how this works. We then design explicit buffers for emotional load. So debrief spaces after tough ER conversations and restructures. Make sure that we're checking in on the people actually having these conversations, not the ones just affected by them. Agree norms of contactability and boundaries, so ensuring that they're not always the default emotional sponges. And then using a simple triage question with leaders. Is this a work design issue, a capability issue, or a behavior issue? Respond differently depending on which it is. Stop treating everybody with the same resilience problem. And so to close off on this, burnout is not a personal failing. It's usually a sign that our work design, our expectations, our support systems don't match the reality of people actually living in, including HR. Where in our organization are we labeling people not resilient enough instead of redesigning the work? What emotional load is HR carrying alone, to Joe's earlier presentation? And how are we making sure that we ensure visible leaders are held accountable? What's the one piece of complexity I can simplify this month to give people more clarity and headspace? And with that, I invite our next speaker to help us unlock some of these things. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much. Just quickly scribbling lots of notes there, more thoughts provoked, and can't wait to bring you back and have a chat with Joe and our next speaker in about 10-15 minutes. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Right, so moving on, and finally, I'm delighted to introduce even Sonia Mooney, HR transformation consultant and creative high impact HR. Sonia will bring this together by focusing on how we redesign work with people at the center. Big fan, obviously, people first. She'll share practical ways to reduce friction, simplify complexity, and create conditions for people to thrive, showing how better work design leads to better business outcomes. Hello and welcome, Sonia.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
All right. And hi, everyone. So before we dive into the slides, I want to take just a moment to focus in on people. So all people, HR across the organization, because for every organization in every industry, our people are our business. They're the most valuable asset that we have. It's through our people that we deliver on our business strategy. So if we want our organizations to succeed, we need our people to succeed, because the experience that we create for our people impacts how they feel, how they show up, how they're able to perform, and how long they stay. We all want our people to have the best experiences. So what's stopping us? And I've got a question for you. Just take a moment to think to yourself, think about your organization, and think about the best process you've experienced. It might be in HR, it might be in another function, IT, finance, wherever it is. Think about that and think about how it felt. Now, I'd guess that you might not even have been able to bring something to mind because the best processes are likely intuitive, seamless. You move through them easily and you go on with your day. But flip that and think about the worst in your organization. What's the worst process? And think about how that felt. A whole different experience, right? A different feeling. Perhaps your confusion, frustration, you didn't know what you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to go. You might have had to stop, ask for help, raise a help desk ticket. Imagine this replicated across your whole organization and across your whole day. And if we jump into the first slide, because burnout isn't always about workload or resilience, it can often be the hidden and unintentional outcome of how work's been designed. Because our organizations are hugely complex. And as we've heard today, and we all know as HR functions, we carry so much. And across our organizations, we're often caught up in legacy complexity. We've got processes and silos that just aren't working for us. People are working on their own space. They're not necessarily thinking about what's wider. We have that never-ending overloaded book of work. The tasks that we have to do every day, every week, every month, the annual calendar to keep our people and organizations running well, keep our people safe. There's the compliance requirements that come in. Add on to that the need to transform ourselves and also show that we're leading innovation. Coupled with our processes and practices that can often be designed by experts for experts without the user lens. And they can be really hard to navigate, driving frustration, productivity impact because of the waste that it drives across our teams and organization. It lowers engagement, and that again impacts productivity. And then coupled with environments where often It's not safe to speak up if things aren't right, if things aren't working, if people and teams are stretched too far, or if you do speak up, it's not acted on. Is it any wonder that we're dealing with some of these challenges that we've talked about today? Because to be successful as an organization, our people need to be enabled by seamless, digital, engaging practices with the right leadership and the right environment to be at their best. So how do we do that? Let's jump to the next slide and we can take a look. So to truly enable your people and your business and create a really high impact HR function, I'm going to give you my 6 key areas of focus. They're simple, they're straightforward. It doesn't mean they're easy, but the best things never are. So let's dive in. Number 1, keep your people at the center. And what does that actually mean? Keep your people at the center of every program, project, process, and perspective. Look at everything through their eyes, walk in their shoes, understand how things feel for them, and redesign with them, not for them. Because designing with your employees helps you create solutions that they can navigate with ease. They don't need to get stuck and ask for help. That's going to reduce waste. That's going to fast track your outcomes and give you better productivity. And it's going to feel better all round. Number 2, simplification. We all have felt the pain of that legacy complexity that ties us in knots and holds us all back. So take a fresh look across your book of work, across your people practices, and ask yourself the question, how much of this is adding value to our people, our business, our customers? Everything from the ongoing projects to every step in a process to the new things that we keep adding in. If it's not adding value, why are we doing it? And it's quite likely holding you back, and it's got to go. So simplification is a skill set and a mindset, and it's one of the most powerful levers that you can pull in your organization to get everything working more effectively. Number 3, we can't do it all, but we try. Particularly in the people function, we want to do it all. We want to deliver for our people, our business, our customers. The trouble is everyone else wants us to deliver everything as well. And we keep adding all of these new requirements. But how often do we stop and think about what we might need to take away? So we need to stop starting and start finishing. So look at everything that you have on. What are those high value items? What are the things that you absolutely have to do? What are those items that are going to really move the business forward and truly enable your people? Identify those, collaborate to deliver them exceptionally, then move on to the next. Because when we try to do everything, we don't land anything. Number 4, collaboration. We need to remember as teams and organizations that we're greater than the sum of our parts. It can be really easy to just focus on what's in front of us and think about my world starts here and stops there, and your world starts over there and stops here. But the trouble is our organizations and the world doesn't work like that. Our people fall into the gaps and feel the impact. We need to build a culture of true cross-functional collaboration across HR, across the entire business, and co-create our solutions so that they're working for us, not against us. And what this enables us to do is bring together that really rich diversity of functional experience, thought, to create solutions that we just wouldn't have been able to design in isolation. And it enables us to maximize our organizational resources and deliver much better outcomes. Leadership. We need to be the change that we want to see. Command and control practices just don't cut it anymore. We need to create an environment where our people want to show up to work, they're enabled to deliver their best, and they want to stay. That means aligning people, purpose, and performance to drive the best possible business outcomes and enable our people to be at their best. And number 6, safe to speak up. And that means together shaping an environment where it is safe to speak up when something isn't right, when practices aren't aligned with our organisational values, when things aren't working, when people and teams are stretched too far. And that's acted on as well. It's not always easy, and we might not always be able to act on what's raised, but by having that open dialogue, acknowledging it, talking about what we can do, what we can't do, what we might need to do a bit further down the line, that helps to keep that two-way conversation and create the right environment. Because the sustainable business performance that we all want doesn't come from pushing harder. We create the best outcomes for our business when we lead with clarity and courage, and we keep our people at the centre of everything that we do. And if you'd like to dive a little bit deeper into any of these concepts and have the tools behind these techniques, let's jump to the next slide. You can head over to my website. There's a ton of free resources. There's a whole free resource library there, and available as of 3rd of April is High Impact HR, the book, the toolkit, and also the transformation templates. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you. And I think it'd be great to bring everybody back into the call now, or the event. How are you?
Good.
Good. Well, thank you. I mean, I've got a lot of questions here. I was wondering, before I talk, was there anything that, any questions that came to your mind to ask one another as you were listening to one another? And if so, please fire away. If not, I've got plenty to say.
Mine's more reflection in that if you bring all of the lenses together, I think it's quite powerful. But it also shows the complexity that we're dealing with. But I think there's also hope there in terms of things can be different.
Yeah, similarly, I don't have a question, but really a statement. I really loved your piece, Joe, on looking after the HR teams first. It's that element of you look after your customers, you look after your employees, they look after each other, and this is something that's often missed in a lot of organizations. So a lot of thought and a lot of information taken away from me there specifically. Well done.
Thank you.
Joe, anything that came to mind, or?
I suppose I was thinking about the theme of resilience, and how resilience feels like it's a blame, like when people, that sense of you need to, like Barrett said at the start, have you ever been told that you should be more resilient? It feels like you're being blamed, like it's a personal responsibility. And my business has got the word resilience in its title. So, I'm very kind of alert to that sort of framing of the term. And I think that I've never thought about it like that. I've always thought of it as something that's much more systemic. It's something that it's about our whole well-being. Resilience, resilience comes when we as individuals are well, and also when our organizations are well. But there's this theme of it being something which is almost like the polar opposite of, like, it's a feature of burnout almost. It's like if you get told you've got to be resilient, you end up being burnt out. But yeah, that I was thinking about that.
Well, one of my questions actually, it's got almost quite a simple one for you, I think, Joe, is for those on the call, how would you actually define burnout? What would be some of the characteristics for those people starting to either try and look for it in their colleagues or in themselves, just as a quick, simple, efficient one? It's quite a complicated topic, no doubt.
I think, personally, as a mental health professional and clinician, I think it is it's particularly complicated because it's not a clinical term. You know, there isn't a diagnosis that you can give to someone that is burnout. And so actually, as I demonstrated in my talk, it crosses over with lots of other things. So actually what you get is often lots of different presentations kind of coexisting. But for me, burnout is about operating beyond our capacity. That's essentially it, you know, and it's okay to function beyond our capacity for a short period of time. You know, when you've got a tight deadline or something that you need to kind of attend to, that put your energy into over the short term, that's fine, as long as you have some time to recover afterwards. But burnout happens when over the longer term, we are continuing to function beyond our capacity. And everything that happens as a result, you know, beyond that first stage of us kind of over striving, it comes as a result of that. You know, we start to get tired. Of course we do. You know, we start to lose passion. We start to get a bit cynical. We start to be resentful about work. And then we start to realize that we cannot function continually like that. And so we start to get anxious about that. We start to disengage, you know, and then at a certain point, if we keep going, we fall flat on our faces. And that's what happens, isn't it? If you're operating beyond the resources, the personal resources that you have. And I think one of the things that I often say to people about what can you look out for is your loved ones will be noticing that. You might be in denial, but your loved ones can see it. So when your partner or your sister or your best friend or whoever says, I'm concerned about you, you seem really stressed, or you're not sleeping enough, or, you know, whatever it is, I think you're working too hard, we need to listen, because that's our first sign, you know. And I think a lot of us will go, yeah, fine, and just carry on. But that external feedback is something that we really need to be alert to.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any reflections on that, either Sonia or Bharat? Because I've got a follow up from that. If not,
yeah. When I think of my own experiences in burnout, I think the simplest way I put it is, on Sunday evening, am I having that sick feeling in my stomach, or am I excited to go to work? And that's the litmus test for me specifically. And again, to extend the point that Joe said, you see it in your family. You often, the people that face the most consequence of you being burnt out is your loved ones. You end up hurting them in ways you don't want to hurt them. So whether it's a short fuse when your child is trying to get your attention, whether it's a quick argument when you're realizing actually there was no reason for you to actually kick off on a certain thing. So for me, it's mainly deciding Sunday evening, am I ready for work and excited to crack on with the week, or is it, oh God, it's work, I'd rather not go in.
Fantastic. Sonia, anything at all, or I can?
I'm good for you to go, Matt.
I mean, because operating beyond our capabilities is what you said, Joe, and then obviously you illuminated that as well, Bharat. I guess the I heard a definition a long time ago, actually pre-COVID, and I'll probably get to that in a second. Somebody, a leader said that he would describe it as, if you were pushing on the accelerator in your car and there was just nothing, you just didn't accelerate. You went to go you put the pedal to the floor and there was just nothing in the tank. And so, like, operating beyond our capabilities is a really nice way of saying that in a different way. I guess there's a number of things that kept coming up, and I'll try and get to all of them. But you can build some great systems. And support systems and systems within the workplace, but how much are external events outside of our control accelerating this or making it a bigger problem? Because it's definitely something that has been talked about way more, and has it always been there, but we haven't talked about it, so we're doing a better job of talking about it and bringing it out to the open, or is it now a bigger problem? Because obviously, COVID put a lot of pressure on the HR teams, but also everybody on as a whole, with work and life and pressure. But then we seem to be having these once-in-a-generation events every 6 months now. That, again, coming back to a really lovely, succinct definition there, operating beyond our capabilities. We have our job, and then we've just been given this that's been created that is attacking our nervous system both inside and outside of work. And I'm just wondering, is this a problem that's always been there, or is it actually a much more pressing problem now that external events is pouring gas on the fire. And I'd just love to have your take on that, really.
I think so. I mean, I think that work has changed immeasurably for, those of us who've been working for 20, 30 years have seen that change. When I first started working in the NHS as a newly qualified clinician, when I finished my working day, I left my office and everything about work stayed in that office. I didn't have access to emails. I didn't do work outside. I didn't have access to technology which connects me with work. And so there was a really clear boundary between work and home life and my personal life, which meant there was space for me to recover from work and recuperate and come back feeling energized and ready to work again. But now the boundaries have completely gone. So we could be there at 2 a.m. writing that report or having a call with someone in America or whatever it is. And I think there feels a pressure for us to be doing that. So, and I think that organizations aren't very good at helping us to reimpose the boundary. The onus has shifted onto us as individuals to do that. And I think that's very hard. And I think then we've got world events too. So if we're thinking about, obviously I'm particularly interested in the well-being of HR professionals, and what I see in them is that they are on the receiving end of all the uncertainty, the stress, that's around to do with what's going on in the world around us. We're facing these incredibly difficult circumstances. We've got war, we've got, climate crisis, we've got cost of living crisis. HR professionals receive all of that. So what they tell me is things like, ER cases are so much more complex than they used to be. Their rates of mental health issues are so much higher than they used to be amongst employees. So they're dealing with the result of all that uncertainty and anxiety that's around in our day-to-day lives, that existential crisis that's going on for us.
Thank you.
It's a bit of a vicious circle, isn't it? And so in one sense, we have technology teams, which, we are one of, that design products to keep engagement high, but that is the same engagement that is leading to burnout. So Google, for example, and Gmail, they've created and developed their UX on the basis that you're always connected to your phone. And so similarly to what Joe said about creating boundaries, we've made COVID reality by having work from home. It's been a benefit to some, but also it's created this gaping hole of I work here, but also there's my bedroom, and there is no clear divide. And so even if you physically shut your laptop, there is still a little bit of that anxiety that hangs around the same area. And so where you're meant to go for rest and sleep, you can't because your laptop's right then. It's just so easy to pop it open. And so I think organizations need to do better, and I think there are some good technologies that are coming in place that can help with that. So Slack, again, allows you to enable it so that you can turn it off during annual leave or specific hours. People also becoming more aware of working practices. I've seen a lot in people's signatures to say, I work different hours that suit my needs. If I respond to you at 10 o'clock at night, my expectation is not for you to respond back, but this is the hours I work. And so if that becomes more acceptable and more the norm, then I think even with external world pressures, we can start easing into looking after people's resilience and mindset a little bit better.
Thank you. Sonia?
Yeah, I mean, I'd add one more thing to this, and that is the world we live in, with the pace of change is faster than ever before. And I think we can all feel that in our organizations. Organizations are trying to keep up with their competitors. Right now it's AI. Transformation is every day. But if we're not designing and leading this work well, often in the process we're making things worse, not better. With our continual desire to reach this utopian state. But a couple of things, as I said earlier, if we try to do everything, we don't land anything. So it's about what should we actually be doing, and focusing our energies on doing that and doing it well, rather than doing 100 things poorly. And also bringing our people with us to transform our organizations in a way that works for them. So when we're bringing in new tech, making sure we're designing with them, not for them. We're getting rid of the complexity that's tangling us up, not just trying to digitalize it or automate it because it's going to hold us back. So it's really thinking about how do we build those strong foundations so that we can move forward and enable our people and our business.
It's that kind of leads me on to another topic I was thinking about, because there is this drive for change and transformation with this AI age that we now live in, and everybody leadership-wise scrabbling to make sure they're not being left behind against their competition, and therefore that pressure then gets put down through the teams and employees. But we're talking around setting sensible expectations of what each of us and each team can achieve, and operating within our capacity. But has AI, and will that continue to make that much worse and harder to have that realistic expectation, because you can do so much more with it, and therefore people expect you to do much more with it?
I think possibly, but it's up to us as leaders in organizations to actually consciously create the environment that we want. Because if we don't do that, everything just piles in, the expectations overflow, and the reality is we can't do it all. The do more with less is always going to be there. So I think it's about taking that stance about how do we want to create our organizations, and to do it really well. It's not easy though.
No, I feel like, very sweeping generalization, but I feel like the default's becoming do more. And because somebody else will do it if you don't. And that's where real responsible leadership needs to come into place and communicate that isn't what we expect. And because I think that is attacking that nervous system, that always on function that people feel in the unsaid moments from leadership.
Yeah, and the reality is, do more with less. There, you get to a point where you just can't do that. But also the ask for it's never worry less about the quality, is it? It's do more and the quality still needs to be there. Well, something's got to give. And thinking about efficiency and effectiveness and enablement and putting all of those pieces together and making some tough decisions, because we can't do it all, we can't land it all. So we need to decide what's most important, what's going to move us forward, and actually, what do we not need to do?
Yeah, what do we not need to do? I think is a great question for people to be asking.
Yeah.
Any reflections on any of that, Joe and Arat?
Well, Chris Britton, who is you'll know, he talks about doing less with less, which I think is, I really like that. I just think actually that's what we need to be doing. We need to be thinking about, if we've got fewer resources, we've got to prioritize, and therefore we do less. We cut out the things that aren't a priority and we focus on the things that are, and therefore we do less with less. So I think there's something I just really like that, because it's simple and it makes huge sense. Whether we can do it or not is another matter, but yeah.
I love that. I definitely agree with that. And again, it goes back to the design. How can we make it so people can say no and we can realistically accept it? Because I think if we generally looked across our organizations, people very much know that some things are a waste of time, or some things are just paying lip service. That's why we're doing it, essentially. And again, they're the boots on the ground, they're on the front line, they know exactly what's moving the needle versus what isn't. But again, I think the higher up the org structure you go, they just refuse to listen, because again, they don't have the context, they don't have the details. And so this goes back to my point about the design. How do we have it so that design is surrounding people that allow them to be comfortable to say no, have the authority to say no without repercussions? And you are right, Joe. It's different in reality. Even if people say no, there is some consequences to that in the day that we work in. How do we prevent that? I don't have an answer at the moment, but I think it's lead by example. If you're able to demonstrate it, your team's able to see it, and it's more visible. Hopefully that encourages and inspires others to do the same thing. And then it's a domino effect. And that change will, of course, take some time, but it starts with just one person.
Agree. And I think a question we can all ask, and we can encourage our teams to ask and create the environment where it's safe to ask why, ask ourselves, why are we doing this task, this project, this whatever it is? Does this move us towards enabling our business strategy or away from it? And if it's away from it, why are we doing it? And to be able to unpick all of those things that we just do because we've always done. And so I think it is about value, and it's about priorities, and it's about creating that environment where we can have these conversations.
Yeah, the ability to ask why, and then the ability to listen to the question that's asked as well. I think it's almost like you're reading my mind here, because the last statement always is leading on to my next thought that I'd written down was around Joe's talking about formal systems of support, and I was nodding behind the scenes there, where the informal ones always fall away when you need them the most, when you're the most busy, most under pressure, and then they just fall away. So you need those formal systems of support there. And then what I just jotted down, and there's become a theme in these comments and in all of your talks, is psychological safety. It's great to have the systems of support there, but the ability to have that environment where you ask for support is way more powerful to actually be able to say I'm struggling, or why are we doing this, and all the things we discussed. So is psychological safety like one of the most, if not the most important part of this puzzle in creating cultures that will prevent burnout, because prevention is better than cure?
It seems to me this, they come together in some ways. It's like, I don't know, you feel engaged and connected with work, and you're more likely to feel well at work if you feel like your organization's got your back, basically, and psychological safety is part of that. Like, if you feel your organization's got your back, they're there to protect you, it's demonstrated in the culture and then in their actions, and kind of automatically psychological safety happens. But I think it has to be seen in some actions. So I guess that's why I think it's important to be thinking about the systems and the structures that we put in place, or the changes that we make, because that's what creates psychological safety. If we, I said in my presentation, I received supervision all the way through my career, and it said something to me. The fact that it existed said something to me. It said, you will need something to support you through your job because it's going to be tough. And we're prepared to give it to you, we're prepared to make the space to give it to you because it's worth it. And that made me feel like the NHS had my back, my profession had my back. Not everyone in the NHS gets it, but somehow my profession does it really well. And so, that gesture spoke to me, and it made me feel psychologically safe. So it has to be seen in some observable actions and measures, I think, and that's how you create it.
Yeah, agree. Because it's easy to write anything in a policy, right, isn't it? Or to have anything in your vision and values, but you've got to be the change you want to see. It's got to be visible and it's got to be felt. Otherwise, it's just words on a page and it's meaningless. And if your people see that and feel that it's meaningless, everything slides.
Yeah, I think so. Sonia and Joe have summed up perfectly well. I've probably got nothing further to add.
So, well, I just appreciate all your talks and all the commentary provided afterwards. We're amazingly out of the hour now. Is there anything you'd like to finish with? Any parting sentiments before we wrap up? We've covered a lot. We have covered a lot. This is our longest conversation, I think, in the Power Hour. So you were the three that stuck to your times most in the past 3 years. So congratulations. We're able to have a fuller conversation.
That's worth noting, isn't it?
Yeah. So look, thank you to all three of you. Really, really appreciate it. I'd just recommend to everybody viewing, both live and on demand, to go check all three of you out and to reach out to you individually. And obviously, from an Inspiring Workplaces perspective, keep coming back. We've got some great events lined up for you and things lined up throughout the year. So thank you to Sonia, Bharat and Joe. And thank you to all for watching. And take care for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.